Hinks, but let's bring in our next guest, and that's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of LikeFolio. Welcome to the show, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so we're talking auto parts sector, maybe a little bit recession-proof on these names, but we're talking Advanced Auto Parts, AutoZone, O'Reilly Automotive. When you look at data on these, and it's hard to get a car, used cars, the life of cars is going longer. It just means for these businesses moving forward, if you can't get a new car or a used car because they're too high priced, are you seeing data that points to the fact that, hey, I just got to fix the one I've got, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely a growing trend because, like you said, it gets so expensive to replace your existing car, whether you're talking new or used. One of the fallouts of chip shortages and pandemic, everybody knows that it's really difficult to get a replacement car, and we're seeing that in the data. I mean, just 4 or 5 years ago, the average car on the road was around 11 years old, and now we're seeing just 4 or 5 years later, the average car on the road over 13 years old. That means people just simply aren't replacing cars nearly as quickly as they used to, and that means more repairs, more breakdowns, more problems, and more do-it-yourself maintenance. We're really seeing a solid uptick on a year-over-year basis in the number of people talking about fixing their car themselves, getting close to those 2019 pre-pandemic levels. We had a lot of influx on this due to stimulus checks, due to people sitting at home, and again, having to fix the car that they had. So that macro trend is good for the industry. What gets really tricky is trying to figure out how inflation concerns, gas price concerns, and a return to work all play out in this sector, because you've got some things like gas prices and inflation, generally speaking, that make people want to stay home and not drive and try to avoid driving. We're seeing a huge uptick in the number of people talking about trying to avoid driving. But on the other hand, people are returning to work, and they've got this pent-up demand for vacationing. So it's really this battle of macro trends that's going on that will be difficult to see how it completely plays out. But for the long term, we're very bullish on the do-it-yourself auto repair industry. And when we look at the key players in that field, the 3 key players, AutoZone, O'Reilly, and Advanced Auto Parts, we're definitely seeing Advanced Auto Parts, AAP, as the real laggard of the group, with significant downdraft in the consumer side of their business, talking about repairing the cars. Looks like consumers are preferring what AutoZone is offering as they get back into this. And so from a near-term standpoint, we do think that Advanced Auto Parts has some real choppiness ahead. They referred to this in their last earnings call. We think that this stock is going to be one that has a tough time getting any real positive momentum going out of the 3, but from a long-term perspective, actually like all 3. So any divergence of the 3, I think, could be an opportunity for long-term investors.
Andy, I have friends in the car business, and they tell me that here's the data, the numbers that they gave to me, which is a domestic car dealer, GM, Ford, all those companies, they make about 2/3 of their monthly expenses via the service department. A foreign car dealer like Mercedes or BMW, they make 100%. They cover 100% of their monthly nut during doing service, which basically means, think about this, in many ways, selling cars is all gravy. It's the service that pays the bills on a monthly basis and sets you up to be profitable. So the longer numbers on owned cars and the service part that comes along with those older cars, is that where this business is really going? Is this, you look at these companies and you basically said they're all 3, one doing a little better short term, but are these companies suppliers of do-it-yourself? Are they suppliers of dealerships? Are they suppliers of all of the above? Will they supply anyone who needs auto parts?
Yeah, it's really, so if you look at it, it's really AutoZone has the least exposure to professional services, whereas Advanced Auto Parts has the most. They have almost flipped that, consumer versus B2B exposure between the two. So there's definitely a lean towards Advanced Auto Parts if you're looking for that professional services provider. From the do-it-yourself perspective, it's AutoZone all the way, and we see that in our data. We see that focus really playing out in our data. And look, I think one of the other factors in what you're talking about is the complexity of the cars. It's gotten to the point where, I've talked to friends that own body shops and service centers, and they really throw their hands up sometimes and say, these cars are getting to the point where it's too expensive for us to have the equipment to repair them. So I think, if you start looking really long term, cars can get so complicated that only the manufacturer is able to fix them, kind of like an Apple iPhone in some ways, and where you can see us sort of moving towards a subscription model for vehicles rather than an ownership model, because at some point it just becomes too difficult to get these repaired cheaply or on your own. But that's down the road. I do think that you bring a good point that these dealerships are almost selling the cars just to build that service base of people coming in throughout the week that need various repairs done.
And that was another question that I had on that, Andy, because it seems like the consumer sentiment numbers on do-it-yourself auto maintenance starting to go up, right?
Yep.
And then the service departments at dealerships are so expensive, maybe that wanes people away from going there unless it's under warranty. But moving forward on these companies, as far as EVs go, is that going to potentially dent these companies moving forward where, hey, if I'm buying a Tesla, I can only get parts from Tesla to fix that, and if I use any other parts that might be in Advanced Auto Parts or AutoZone, it's going to negate my warranty. Is that reason for concern for a lot of these companies as we push the EV?
Yeah, well, I think the EV is absolutely a concern for these companies because the other part of an electric vehicle, and I know this as an owner of one for 2 years, I haven't had to do one single thing of maintenance at this point, 2 years in. In fact, I don't think the first scheduled maintenance is for 4 years, and that's an air filter. I mean, it's unbelievable how little these cars need from an attrition standpoint. It's all about the battery and how long that can last. So I do think that the more market share EVs have, the less demand there will be for any type of repair, whether that's professional or do-it-yourself.
Yeah, and hopefully Apple doesn't get into the car game like they've been hinting around, because after 2 years, maybe the battery starts dying. You got to buy a new phone, or a new car, just like their phones at this point. All right, great stuff as always, Andy. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Thanks, you too.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder of LikeFolio, breaking down the data on the auto parts sector.